Welcome back, everyone. All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We are going to build complete conceptual mastery of a truly classic piece of literature from your curriculum. We're talking about Ruskin Bond's incredible poem, Grandma Climbs a Tree. We're going to break down every single concept, every new vocabulary word, and honestly, the absolutely brilliant story hidden inside these lines. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's unravel this wonderful text together.
So I want you to just stop and think for a second. What picture immediately pops into your head when you hear the word grandma, right? Maybe it's someone sitting peacefully in a rocking chair, or someone knitting a warm sweater, or maybe baking cookies. We all kind of share this collective cultural idea of what a grandmother is supposed to act like, don't we? Well, what's truly interesting here is how that expectation perfectly sets up the contrast at the very heart of our poem. Look, on one side, we have the stereotypical grandma. But on the flip side, we have Ruskin Bond's grandma. And let me tell you, she isn't knitting. She's practically a ninja. I mean, she prefers hanging from branches over taking an elevator. This poem is so incredibly fun because it just completely shatters all our expectations of how an older person is supposed to behave.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the rebel grandma.
Right off the bat, we are introduced to the protagonist of our poem, and the poet establishes her dominant, lifelong, totally gravity-defying passion with a massive claim. He says, "My grandmother was a genius." Notice he doesn't say she was smart because she knew advanced math or science. No, he says she's a genius because she could climb trees. And not just one specific type of easy tree. The text says whether they were spreading or high, she could conquer them all. And here is the absolute kicker. The last time she climbed a tree, she was 62 years old. Literally 62.
Now, to really grasp her skill level, we need to look at our first vocabulary word from the text, in a trice, which basically means very quickly. The poem actually tells us she learned to climb from a loving brother when she was just 6 years old. Think about that. For over 55 years, she's had this incredible gift. The poet says she'd be up those branches in a trice, just boom, in the blink of an eye. She was literally happier up in a tree than she was riding in a modern elevator, or a lift as they call it in the poem.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of our entire story. You see, as the years went by, her family and friends kept nagging her, telling her that climbing trees should stop when you grow old. Society completely expects older people to age gracefully, to be quiet, calm, safe. But how does our rebel grandma respond? She just laughs and says, "Well, I'll grow disgracefully. I can do it better." She actively chooses the rebellious path. She totally refuses to let society dictate how she should live her life. And honestly, her family just had to agree because there wasn't a single tree in the garden she hadn't been up.
Which brings us to part two, the terrible fall.
Okay, so every hero's journey has a moment of crisis, right? For years, it was feared by all that one day, this highly energetic 62-year-old woman would have a terrible fall. But the poet throws us a fantastic plot twist. While the rest of her family was away in town, she didn't actually fall. Instead, she climbed a tree and, well, she simply got stuck. She couldn't come down and eventually had to be rescued.
Let's pause for a quick whiteboard moment to lock in another vocabulary word from your textbook, outcome. An outcome is basically what actually happened in the end, the final result. See, the feared outcome was a broken bone from a terrible fall, but the actual outcome was just a slightly embarrassing rescue operation while her family was out of town. But honestly, the rescue was just the beginning of her troubles. The doctor came over, took her temperature, and strictly recommended a full week of bed rest. For the family, this was a massive relief. They finally sighed and tucked her safely into bed. But for Grandma, the poem literally describes being stuck in that bedroom as a brief season in hell. Just imagine being a wild bird forced into a tiny little cage. For someone so active and deeply connected to the outdoors, being confined to a bed felt like absolute torture.
Moving right along to part three, the treehouse triumph.
You really can't keep a good rebel down for long, can you? As soon as she felt stronger, she sat right up and declared, "I'll lie here no longer." She called for her son, who is the poet's father, and demanded a permanent solution. The poet notes that his dad knew his duties and agreed immediately. We've got two great vocabulary words here, chore, meaning a task, and undaunted, meaning without hesitation. So with the young poet's expert assistance, the father undauntedly finished the chore. And what exactly was this chore? Building Grandma a house right up in the canopy of the tree. Her amazing triumph was officially cemented. I mean, they didn't just throw a few random planks of wood up there, they built her a proper treehouse with actual windows and a door.
So Granny moved up, finally claiming her new wooden kingdom high above the ground, right exactly where she always belonged. And this leads to the absolute best part, how the poem actually resolves. Every single day, the grandson climbs up to her room carrying glasses and a tray. She sits up there in state, literally like a queen on a throne, and drinks sherry, which is a type of yellow or brown wine. And in doing so, she is upholding her undeniable right to reside in a tree. She is making it perfectly, abundantly clear to the entire world that she is going to live exactly how she wants to live. It is such a beautiful, triumphant ending. All right, time for part 4. Whiteboard detective, check your understanding. Now that we've got the narrative fully mastered, let's test our skills. We aren't just going to blindly memorize answers here. We are going to act as whiteboard detectives. So, I want you to put on your detective hats. Remember, in literature, whenever you are asked a question, the text itself is your crime scene. The evidence you need is always hidden right there in the actual lines of the poem. So, mystery number 1 from your textbook. The speaker does not call his grandmother childish. What else was she according to him, and why? Well, if we look back at lines 1 through 4, the evidence is crystal clear. He considers her a genius, precisely because she possessed this incredible, highly unusual skill of climbing any tree, whether spreading or high, even at the age of 62. Moving to mystery number 2. This one asks us to identify the lines that suggest climbing trees was a lifelong habit. Let's look for the clues. If we check lines 13 and 14, they tell us she learned to climb from a loving brother when she was 6. And then lines 5 and 6 explicitly state, ever since childhood, she'd had this gift for being happier in a tree than in a lift. Combine that with the fact that she is currently 62, and boom, we have undeniable proof of a lifelong 56-year habit. Case closed. Let's pivot to part 5. Meet the creator, Ruskin Bond. Now that we've solved the mysteries of the text itself, let's meet the brilliant mind behind this highly entertaining poem. Understanding the author always gives us so much more context and appreciation for their work. Ruskin Bond is an absolute legend in Indian English literature. Born in Kasauli back in 1934, he currently lives in Missouri. He was actually a bit of a prodigy himself, writing his first novel, The Room on the Roof, when he was just 17. He's gone on to write more than 30 children's books. But here's what's super fascinating. In his own autobiography, Bond talks about his real-life Calcutta granny. She was this quirky person who sat entirely alone in the evenings playing a card game called Patience. It's highly likely that his own real-world quirky grandmother inspired his love for writing about highly unusual, convention-breaking characters, just like the tree-climbing genius in our poem. And finally, part 6, a bonus poem called Who Me by Joyce Armour. Before we wrap up this explainer, your textbook offers a fantastic little palate cleanser right at the end of the chapter. It's a quick, hilarious bonus poem. Let's take a rapid-fire look at it. This poem is told from the perspective of a kid who claims there is this invisible, unseen guy living in their house, causing absolute, utter chaos. I mean, just look at this rap sheet of crimes. This mysterious ghost guy broke the family vase. He painted the pet Fluffy green. He drew funny pictures on the brother's door, left shriveled worms in the dresser drawer, stole all the favorite cookies, and, perhaps worst of all, shoved a whole tuna sandwich right into the brand new VCR. But wait for it, here comes the brilliant punchline at the very end. The narrator finally admits, in fact, he does most everything that you might think is bad. Of course, he isn't really real, just don't tell mom and dad. The invisible kid is just an imaginary scapegoat. The narrator is the one causing all the trouble and is just blaming it on a make-believe ghost to avoid getting grounded. It's a totally hilarious, relatable twist that perfectly caps off our chapter on mischievous behavior. So what is the big takeaway here? Both of our poems today celebrate breaking the rules just a little bit. But going back to Ruskin Bond's masterpiece, Grandma reminds us that society will always try to tell you what you can and cannot do based on your age or simply who you are. But she chose to build a treehouse instead of staying confined in bed. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As you go through your own hero's journey, are you going to just conform and live life gracefully, or are you going to find your own tree to climb and live beautifully, disgracefully? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time. Listen up, candidates. Welcome to this Masterclass Explainer. I'm a veteran board evaluator, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to extract maximum marks from Ruskin Bond's Grandma Climbs a Tree. We are focusing strictly on your English second language paper, subject code 31-E.
Let's skip the basic story time, shall we? You already know the plot, but do you know exactly what is going on inside the examiner's mind? Because knowing the story simply isn't enough to get top grades, you need to know exactly what we are scanning for on your paper. Evaluators have hundreds of papers to check, and trust me, we are looking for very specific value points to award you those marks. Look, this single chapter is an absolute favorite for the long answer section, and there are 4 massive marks on the line that you literally cannot afford to lose. 4 marks can easily be the difference between an A and an A+ grade, so we are going to lock this down right now.
You're going to see this prompt, or some variation of it, asking you to substantiate her zeal for climbing trees a lot. It appears repeatedly in the previous year's question papers. Whether they ask about her being a genius or how Ruskin Bond portrayed her right to reside in a tree, your core answer structure remains exactly the same. Let's break down how to tackle this.
Section 1. 1-mark MCQs strategies, direct hits. Evaluators absolutely love this question. Picture this. You're in the exam hall, under immense pressure, the clock is ticking, and you vaguely remember it was a family member, right? So you just rush and circle the first option that looks okay. Well, let's look at how the board tests this exact scenario. If you don't read the poem carefully, you might guess her father or even her son, because, hey, the son plays a big role later in the poem. But the official key answer requires a very specific, undisputed response. Boom, you must select option D, her loving brother, and grab this extra detail while you're at it. He taught her to climb when she was just 6 years old. That number 6 is a crucial piece of data you'll need for your long answer later too. All right, here is another frequent 1-mark MCQ trap. My dad knew his duties. Okay, but what exactly was his duty? This question tests if you know the difference between the doctor's medical advice and the dad's actual duty. The poem distinctly separates the two. Do not fall for the trap option that says his duty was to advise her to stop. No way. His duty as a dutiful son was to build her a literal treehouse with windows and a door. He provided her with the expert assistance to finish that chore. Now that we've secured the 1-markers, let's move on to section 2, the 4-mark master answer. When my team and I are grading your paper, we are actively scanning for a logical sequence of events, mapping out Grandma's chronological journey. This brilliantly illustrates the flow you need to hit. You start at age 6 with the brother, jump to age 62 where she is miraculously still climbing, hit the climax where she gets stuck, follow up with the doctor's 1-week bed rest, and end with the resolution, the dutiful son building the treehouse. Okay, this is it, the holy grail. Listen closely, because these aren't just polite suggestions. They are the literal KSEEB evaluation key. If you want all 4 marks, you absolutely must include these exact textual keywords. Call her a genius. Mention she chose to grow disgracefully. Describe her bed rest as a brief season in hell. And make sure you call her son dutiful. We scan specifically for these phrases. But knowing the words isn't enough if you fall into traps. That brings us to section 3, mark traps and error prevention. Look at the stark difference here. On the left, that is generic fluff that gets you a single, lonely mark. But the right side contains the specific value points that command a perfect 4. The right side tells the examiner, I know the text, I know the data, and I know Ruskin Bond's specific phrasing. And if you want to completely bulletproof that perfect score, always quote her exact reaction when people told her to grow old gracefully. Dropping this quote in shows true literary appreciation and proves you know the material inside out. It adds that perfect layer of polish that secures the final half mark. To make sure you don't forget this under exam pressure, let's look at section 4, high-yield memory aids. Let's lock this into your brain. Memorize this exact 5-star sequence of Grandma sitting in state in her treehouse. Link it to these 5 sequential keywords that form the absolute backbone of your answer. Genius, brother, 62, bed rest, treehouse. If you just remember these 5 beats, you can effortlessly build your 8 to 10 sentences around them. Look, at the end of the day, the crucial point is this.
We want to give you full marks, we really do. But you have to make our job easy by highlighting those official value points on your answer sheet. Don't make the evaluator hunt for your knowledge. Serve it to us on a silver platter.
So are you ready to write the perfect answer and claim your guaranteed marks? Take these strategies, practice writing out those value points using the sequence we just discussed, and go totally dominate your English SSLC board exam. But before you go, ask yourself this. If Ruskin Bond's grandmother found her ultimate freedom up in a tree, what unconventional place might you find yours? Next time, we might just dive into Joyce Armour's poem, Who, Me, to explore that very idea. Until then, keep analyzing and stay sharp.